Okay, good morning, everybody. Maybe I should say "Bonan Mateno," which is good morning in Esperanto. Normally, I like to poll and ask how many people have heard about Esperanto before, but often I find many people haven't. The, the few that do know about Esperanto tend to know two things about Esperanto. One, that it was an attempt to bring about world peace through having everyone speak a common language, and second, that it was a failure. I've noticed that all overhyped TED Talks always start with saying something and saying, of course, it's not true. Of course, this is not true either. Is that what I'm going to try to convince you of today? First of all, for those of you who don't know anything about Esperanto, I'm going to tell you what Esperanto is. And I'm going to say, for those of you who have heard these ideas, they're wrong, or at least they're wrong as stated. So what is this thing, Esperanto? Well, we have to go back a little bit in history and talk about this very interesting man named Ludwig Zamenhof, who died in 1917. Zamenhof is quite an amazing, quite an interesting person amongst he's most famous for inventing a language, and that language is Esperanto. What's his backstory? Well, he was born in a town in Poland. And this this is from a biography of Zamenhof written in Poland. And what it says is that the great man who created Esperanto, Zamenhof, was born in Poland in the small city of Białystok. There's a picture of Białystok. Białystok in 1859, the year that Zamenhof was born. It was a multi-ethnic city. At that time, Poland was part of the Russian Empire. It was inhabited by Jews, Poles, Russians, Germans, and others. Naturally, they got along extremely well. Well, no, actually not. This was a time of intense ethnic hatred, ethnic prejudice. There were regular pogroms against the Jews, tension between the Russians and the Poles, Polish nationalists versus Russian imperialism. So there was a lot of intense pressure and conflict between the groups that existed here, something that had a deep effect upon the young Zamenhof. He wanted to do something about it. He wanted to bring people together. So they say when you put up slides, you should never put up lots of text on the slide. So I love the slide because not only is there too much text on it, but it's also in a different language. Yeah. But so it's like the worst possible slide. Fortunately, I have a translation below. It's from the same essay about Zamenhof. It said, in that city lived 4 different unequal nations. The young Zamenhof saw the hatred between these different groups, these different language groups, and he wanted to do something about it. What was his background? So he was trained as an ophthalmologist. He was a polyglot, fluent in several languages. We're not completely sure of how many languages he knew, but we certainly know that he was fluent. Well, first of all, he was fluent in both Yiddish and Polish because of where he grew up. He spoke German. He spoke Russian. He studied medicine. He went to medical school in Russia. He spoke English. He spoke French. And we know that he could read Old Testament Hebrew and that he could read New Testament Greek. So we know that he was fluent in a bunch of different languages. Early on, he became politically involved in the early Zionist movement, which was at that time an effort to do something about the terrible situation of Jews in Europe. But later, he moved away from it and he rejected all forms of nationalism. He felt that nationalism itself was a problem in the world and you needed to address nationalism if you wanted to bring about better understanding between people. So he hit upon this idea of creating a language. And in 1887, he published a book. It was first published in Russia. So we celebrate 1887 as being the year, the foundation of Esperanto. It was called the International Language. Now, this was a time where it was always a little risky to publish new ideas under the Tsarist regime. So Zamenhof thought, being prudent, he published it under a pseudonym. So he published it under Dr. Esperanto, which means one who hopes in Esperanto. That's the Esperanto word for one who hopes. his intention, he called his project the international language. But over time, his followers, his supporters adopted Esperanto as the name of the language in honor of his creation, in honor of the creator of the language. So what was Esperanto and what made it special? It wasn't the only planned language that's been created. There were some before, there have been many since. It's certainly the most successful planned language that's ever been created. And the advantage of having a planned language, the goal of having a planned language, was first to design a language that would be easy to learn. So for example, it would be, all the spelling would be phonetic. And all the rules would be completely regular. So anyone who's studied a foreign language knows about irregular verbs and the complexity of them and the exceptions that exist in all language. This would be a language that had no exceptions whatsoever. Anyone who tries to learn English sees the advantage. Wouldn't it be great if it was phonetic like some other languages? It would have a system of word formation, which would allow creativity, innovation, and also make the language easier to learn. So it has a system of affixes, which I'll show you in a second, that make the language much, much easier to learn than naturally evolved languages, okay? And it was supposed to be an auxiliary language. So as I mentioned before, one of the myths about Esperanto is that, well, it was supposed to replace all the natural languages, didn't do that, therefore it failed. That was never the intention of Zamenhof. The idea was to have a single auxiliary language that people could use when they traveled around. To some extent, he was influenced by Yiddish in this sense, because Yiddish was a portable language that could be taken around, so that Polish Jews, for instance, could talk to Latvian Jews in Yiddish. His idea was that you would have this one language that was easy to learn. It wasn't meant to replace any additional language. It wasn't meant to discourage you from learning other languages. But by having this one language that people had in common that was easy to learn, therefore you communicate with people. If you think about it, even the most assiduous polyglot can only speak maybe 10 to 12 languages, something like that. There's some claims more than that, but people debate whether that's real or not. But even speaking 3 or 4 languages is a tremendous effort. So here was this idea that you would have this one common language that you could learn, and then you could travel all over the world and speak to people in this language. And I can testify this every week. I am on Zoom or some other internet forum talking to people from all over the world in this language. So I speak to people, for instance, from Japan. They don't speak English. I don't speak Japanese, but we can speak together in Esperanto. Esperanto was designed to be neutral, not tied to any imperial power. So therefore, you weren't speaking it because you had been conquered by the British or the French or whatever. It was not an ethnic language. It was designed to be a language that didn't have any of those associations, and therefore easier for people to accept. By the way, here's the Esperanto translation of Winnie the Pooh and the Little Prince into Esperanto. Okay. Yes. So I promised, or maybe threatened, to tell you a little bit about Esperanto grammar. So here's just a couple of examples of things that Esperanto does. So there's a prefix in Esperanto, mal. And mal, you put that on the front of any word and it turns it into its opposite. So for instance, if young is yuna, then old is mal yuna. If light is lumo, dark is mal lumo. And therefore, by a set of tricks like that, it dramatically reduces the amount of vocabulary that you have to learn. So there have been some experiments on this, and a person can learn Esperanto in a fraction of the time that it takes to learn natural language. And I don't want to oversell some people. Oh, it's an easy language. It's easier compared to other languages. You still have to work a bit to, a little bit of memorization is involved and so forth. But it is substantially easier than any natural language to learn. Here are some verbs. So the verb ami is the infinitive form, which is to love. So amas, the as is the present tense, os is the future tense, and is is the past tense. and that's it. There's also I should say, there's also subjunctive and an imperative form, but that's all you really need, and that's it. No more memorizing irregular verbs like you might have to in so many languages like English or Spanish or whatever. You learn these rules. You can learn this in a very short period of time, and you know all the rules. They never change. Okay. So as I said, Zamenhof did not believe that Esperanto alone would end war, but he did believe that it would contribute to overcoming differences between people by allowing them to communicate and talk about their differences. So what happened to this language? Well, in the period prior to the 1930s, this language really took off. Esperanto had enormous influence, and it was embraced by many people across the world. Here's a list of Nobel Prize winners who were Esperantists. Alfred Herman Fried is this imposing-looking gentleman here. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was an enthusiastic supporter of Esperanto. Here are some other famous Esperantists, some of whom you may have heard of. J.R. Tolkien was an Esperantist. He was active in the Esperanto Association in England, wrote an essay about Esperanto. Leo Tolstoy was an Esperantist. He claimed he was very enthusiastic about the idea. He claimed that he learned the language in a single afternoon. Some people think that might be an exaggeration, though Tolstoy himself was a polyglot and spoke several languages, so it's not inconceivable. Jules Verne is an interesting example. Verne was very interested in Esperanto. If you remember in the novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo assembles a crew of people from all over the planet, and there needed to be some kind of language to communicate in. Now, he doesn't mention Esperanto as being that language in his book, but when Verne died, he was writing a novel. It's unfinished, but Esperanto is a crucial aspect of the plot of the book. Susan Polgar, who you see pictured here, famous chess grandmaster, is an Esperantist, daughter of a famous Hungarian Esperantist. George Soros is in the news a lot these days. George Soros is also Hungarian, also the son of a prominent Hungarian Esperantist. When the family had to get out of Central Europe, as a lot of people did, they took up a pseudonym. So Soros is not the original family last name. The word Soros is the Esperanto word for will fly. So George Soros, who still speaks Esperanto today, by the way, has an Esperanto last name. You may, unless you're an avid science fiction fan, you may not know Harry Harrison. Harry Harrison, he was American, he became an expat, lived in Ireland for a number of years, and became the head of the Irish Esperanto Association. He's most famous for writing a novella called Make Room, which was made into the film Soylent Green, which some of you may have seen. I've given this talk to younger audiences, and sometimes I say these things and they just look like, what are you talking about? You know?
I just watched it.
Oh, you just saw Soylent Green?
Very recently.
Oh, yeah, it's a great movie.
Scoops are on their way.
So, the movies. So this is Charlie Chaplin from the movie The Great Dictator. It's one of his talkie films. This is the Jewish tailor walking through the Jewish quarter. All the signs are in Esperanto. So that sign says old clothes, is what that sign says for the shop. So all the signs in his movie, he wanted them to appear like they were in a foreign language. So he chose Esperanto to be that language. It's not the only time that Esperanto has appeared in film. I think my favorite example is the movie Road to Singapore with it's one of these Crosby Hope comedies. So it's supposed to be about Singapore. It's not clear that the screenwriters knew very much about Singapore when they wrote the film. Of course, it's not filmed in Singapore. Partly it's made in 1941, so that's not the time you want to be going to the South Pacific. But so the big dance number in the film, which is actually filmed in the Los Angeles Arboretum, you see the indigenous women come out and sing a song in the native Singaporean language. The song is in Esperanto, and you can see if you're interested, you can find this on YouTube and watch the song with the subtitles. And my favorite example of all is the animated Superman Batman film Apocalypse. They needed a language for the planet Krypton, so the Kryptonians are speaking Esperanto. Okay. In its heyday, or its first period, Esperanto was embraced by all kinds of people: pacifists, suffragists, socialists, Rotarians, anarchists. How often you see anarchists and Rotarians on the same line? Theosophists, Tolstoyans. I said Tolstoy gave it a lot of credibility. Vegetarians, naturalists, Chautauquans, and it's been endorsed by a number of religions. So it's been endorsed by the Baha'i faith, the Omoto religion of Japan. If you go to the Omoto YouTube channel, they have a quite wonderful introduction to Esperanto course on their YouTube channel. It's endorsed there. So one of the things you notice when you get into the Esperanto world, there's a lot of Esperantists in Brazil, and the reason is there's a religion in Brazil called Spiritism, which embraced Esperanto. So Spiritism is found in some other parts of the world, but it really took hold similar to some kind of New Age American religions. In fact, I bought some religious text with me. This is the Hare Krishna. I have a book in Esperanto. Here's a book published in Japan. It's The Teachings of the Buddha. It's by the Society for the Propagation of Buddhism. And they have published a book in Esperanto. So lots of publications. The Vatican has a show every 2 weeks in Esperanto. So on the Vatican radio station, on their shortwave station, which you can listen to online. Esperanto was taken up by many social reform movements. Here's a copy of Edward Bellamy's famous novel, Looking Backwards, translated into Esperanto. And one of the movements that it was taken up by was the Chautauqua movement, which some of you will know because of its proximity to Cleveland. So here is an announcement in the American Esperantisto, which was the name, the publication still exists, but has another name now. But this was the journal of the North American Esperantist League. And it tells you that in 1908, there is going to be a National Congress of Esperantists at the Chautauqua Institution in Western New York. And here's the New York Times article about that conference. And it tells you that they raised the American flag. Later in the article, I didn't put the whole thing in here. They sang "My Country, 'Tis of Thee," translated into Esperanto, and they had Esperanto classes that you could attend all there at the Chautauqua Institution. Okay. Another Ohio connection, the city of Lithopolis, Ohio, which I have been to, it's about 25 minutes, half an hour south of Columbus. There lived Mabel Wagnalls-Jones. She was heir to a publishing fortune. You may have heard of the Funk and Wagnalls dictionary. So she was an heir to it. She became interested in it's actually quite an interesting story. She wrote a novel and that was popular. An Esperantist wrote her and said, "Can we translate this into Esperanto?" She never heard about it before. So she inquired about it and became fascinated with it. And she wanted to transform Lithopolis, Ohio into a worldwide Esperanto center. And if you go there now, the library actually has a very interesting collection of archival. Her family financed the building of the library there. So it's wonderful. It looks like an old mansion. It's a wonderful old building. And they do have archives there with Esperanto material. Quite interesting. Unfortunately, it never became. Her husband died, and she did not pursue Esperanto after that point. So, but the people there know. You talk to librarians there; they know about it. So, okay. So the 18th National Congress of Esperanto was held here in Cleveland, Ohio. This is July 1925. So you can see around. I don't know where this was held, but around some banquet table, you see the Esperantists here in Cleveland congregating. It also has a connection to Cleveland State University. So this is Franz Tomich. Sometimes you'll see his name rendered as Frank Tomich. This is this gentleman sitting right here in the front here with in that suit. He was the foreign language teacher. Originally taught at Nash College, Nash College was affiliated with Fenn College and was eventually folded into Fenn College. So he became the head of the foreign language department at Fenn College, which of course eventually was the seed for Cleveland State University. I'll just mention, I've been trying to find out more information about this. He did meet an unfortunate end. When he retired, he moved to Florida, and there was suspicion that he had been murdered down there. And the police detained two suspects, but they were never indicted. So I don't really know how strong the evidence was or what the whole story was on that. Okay, so from Cleveland, we'll move to Asia. So Esperanto had many followers in Asia. People are sometimes surprised, say, isn't it a European-based language? And it's true that most of the roots for words come from European words. But Esperanto did obtain popularity in Asia. First of all, because it wasn't tied to any particular nation. So if you thought about creating a language, an auxiliary language based upon Asian languages, it's hard to think of how you would do that. That is, Japanese speakers might object to a language based upon Chinese roots and vice versa. So Esperanto was neutral. And it was of European languages. It was just so much easier to learn than the other languages. So here's a copy of a Esperanto Asian publication. Many more have come since then. Esperanto was particularly popular on the political left, popular with anarchists, socialists, pacifists, and communists. Here's Osugi Sakaue. He was a Japanese anarchist and an Esperantist, but he was executed by the police in 1923. And that's going to be a theme that we're going to see coming up pretty soon, unfortunately. One individual who played a big role in Esperanto in Asia was Nguyen Sinh Kung. He was a Vietnamese nationalist. He learned to become a pastry chef, and he worked as a pastry chef on ships. And he traveled, he spent time in the United States, in New York and Boston, spent time in Paris, lived in London in 1915, where he learned Esperanto. He became fluent in Esperanto. You may not know him by his birth name, but you're likely to know him by his nom de guerre, Ho Chi Minh. And Ho Chi Minh was an Esperantist. He had some of his prison notebook translated into Esperanto. Okay. Other things, it's a slight, I was deciding whether I should leave this in or not. Ebenezer Howard, he was the founder of what was called the Garden City movement, wrote a book called Garden Cities of Tomorrow, influenced by the social reformer Bellamy. He was an enthusiastic Esperantist, and he used Esperanto to promote this idea of the Garden City movement, which did have some influence on some of the architecture and some of the city planning that went on, particularly in some of the suburbs here in the Cleveland area. So that's my justification for including Ebenezer Howard in this presentation. So did Esperanto ever become an official language anyplace? There was an effort to make it the official language of the League of Nations after the First World War, but the French vetoed it because they felt that French should be the official language of the League of Nations. But there was actually an effort to create an Esperanto-speaking state. It turns out that in Europe, there was a very small area created at the end of the Napoleonic War called Neutral Morsent. And it's a very small piece of land which was administered by several countries at the same time, which meant that it wasn't administered very much at all. It only comprised 3.5 square kilometers, but it had a zinc mine there. And it declared itself an Esperanto republic with the name Amikeo, which means place of friendship. This was mainly the work of Wilhelm Bohle, who was the physician at the zinc plant and its main organizer. And the plan was to create this Esperanto-speaking state. They were going to open a casino, and they were hoping that it would be a place where there would be no taxes, but they would be able to establish an Esperanto college. Unfortunately, political realities meant an end to that. 1914 came. It was almost immediately annexed by the Germans, and that put an end to the plan. Okay. So what happened to Esperanto? There was, as I said, there was a lot of interest. It was taught in universities in the United States. It was widely embraced. And then people say it failed. It went away. Well, one reason I said they failed is people say it's failed is because people hold it to something that it never set to be its task. It never planned to replace the language. But something else happened. The epicenter of the Esperanto movement was always at that time Central Europe. And even though it claimed political neutrality, it drew hostility, especially from nationalists. In fact, it was specifically condemned in Mein Kampf. So Hitler specifically singles out Esperanto as being a Jewish plot to dominate the world. And as a consequence, Esperanto is going to be banned or was banned in Germany. His Himmler artificial language Esperanto is part of Esperantism, the tool of the Jews. So that's the kind of anti-Semitic rhetoric. Zamenhof himself was Jewish, so and of course there was this antipathy towards any kind of internationalism during that period. So Esperanto was banned in Germany. Indeed, I recently watched a lecture from a Slovakian Esperantist. He gave a lecture about the history of Esperanto in, what was Czechoslovakia then. And he's going through this list of famous Esperantists or important Esperantists, who were important in the founding. And you look at them, his birth date and the death dates, like 1941, 1942, and you realize these are all people who died during the Second World War. This reached all the way to Cleveland, by the way. Zamenhof's daughter, Lydia Zamenhof, came to the United States in the late 1930s to teach Esperanto. So she used to teach Esperanto classes at the Hippodrome Theater that used to be in downtown Cleveland. This is a flyer from an Esperanto class that she taught in Lima, Ohio. Unfortunately, she was deported in 1938, sent back to Poland, and she died in the Treblinka death camp. So it's very sad end to that. Okay, so Esperanto is banned in Germany. Many die in the Holocaust. All three of Zamenhof's adult children died in the death camps. He did have a grandchild, though, who managed to escape. And so there are still direct descendants of Zamenhof. And every year at the Universal Congresso, as we call it, the International Congress, a member of the Zamenhof family gets up and gives a tribute to or a welcoming to the conference. But it wasn't just banned in areas controlled by the Axis. Even though Esperanto initially, after the Russian Revolution, Esperanto was actually quite popular in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution. But when Stalin comes to power, he reasserts Russian nationalism, declares Esperanto the language of spies, and Esperanto is banned in Russia in 1937. It does come back later after the Khrushchev reforms, but there's a long period of time where it's banned in Russia. So this hollowing out of the Esperanto movement, particularly in its core, meant that Esperanto went into retreat for many years, but not forever. There has been an Esperanto revival. Here are just some pictures from all over the world showing different Esperanto groups. That's in Tanzania. This one is in Brazil, and that's in Vietnam. So there's Esperanto groups in different countries. What brought back Esperanto? It's the internet. The internet has contributed. So in the last 20 years or so, there has been a real revival of Esperanto on the internet. So I hear a few examples of Esperanto YouTube channels that you can go and watch. Here are some websites. Duolingo, which is a language learning website. Some of you may have used it for some other language. Has an Esperanto class on it. The owl in Duolingo's name is Strigo, which is the Esperanto word for owl. By the way. What? Sorry.
What is it again?
Strigo. Strigo, yes. The owl's name is Strigo, and it's from Esperanto. There are sites there like Lernu, which will help you learn Esperanto, Italki. By the way, if you want to learn any foreign language, Italki is a wonderful place to go. It's a place where you can hire foreign language tutors for very little money to help you practice in a language. So even if you're not interested in Esperanto, but want to learn another language, I highly recommend Italki. It does have Esperanto tutors, though, too. By the way, learning Esperanto, there's evidence that learning Esperanto can help you learn other languages. So there's some benefit beyond just knowing Esperanto itself. But as the internet has created a whole world now of Esperanto speakers, and as I mentioned before, every week I am in communication with people all over the world, talking about issues, talking about politics, talking about the weather, talking about all kinds of, reading books together. I'm in this one group right now where we're reading the Esperanto translation of The Wizard of Oz, which is very interesting because in the United States, we've all seen the movie, but there are lots of people in the world who've never heard the story before. So as adults, they're hearing the story for the first time. So it's very, and the book is different from the movie. So as an American, you're always saying, oh, this is different. It's silver shoes, not ruby slippers. And you're always comparing to the movie. But people who have no experience with the book, they come from completely different angles. So it's a very interesting experience. But I have been in groups. I was in one Esperanto meeting, and some of these things people just pop in. And I was in this one meeting, and on this Zoom chat, there was an Israeli Esperantist, an Iranian Esperantist, an Egyptian Esperantist. And I said, where else could you have this happening? I thought that was pretty cool. So, okay. Esperanto in films. So there have been a number of films made in Esperanto. Perhaps the most famous, but not particularly liked by Esperantists, is Incubus. And yes, that is the young William Shatner. And I have to say, I gave this this presentation to a high school group, and I said William Shatner, and I got like blank stares from the room. And I said he was the first Captain Kirk in Star Trek. And then people that relieved the tension. And people said, "Oh, okay, we know what you're talking about, old person." Right? This is Guerra Mala Paris, which is a Brazilian film. It's based on a novel. It's based on a novel written by a Frenchman. The film is made in Brazil in Esperanto. So the book is written in Esperanto. The film is in Esperanto. This is Pasporto al Tutto Mondo, a very cheesy movie, but much loved by Esperantists. And also, it's actually a film designed to teach you Esperanto, and it is available on YouTube if you want to watch it. There is a bunch of B movies which have been made. There's the Attack of the Moon Zombies have been made in Esperanto. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there, available out there. There's Esperanto. If you've ever seen the movie Gattaca, there's Esperanto in the movie Gattaca. So how many people speak this language? Okay, so the best estimate we have is from Army Vondel, who is an astrophysicist, and he did an estimation based upon the use of websites and figures from national organizations that probably the Esperanto community encompasses about 2 million people. So you'll hear various numbers floated around. I like 2 million because it sounds big. I can't say I know for sure that's the number, but there are a lot of Esperantists in the world, many more than you would suspect, and they do form a vibrant community that communicates now via the World Wide Web and sometimes in person as well. Okay, here is Lernu, which is a site for learning Esperanto. It has about 200,000 visitors every month, just to give you an idea of the appeal of the language. There is an Esperanto Wikipedia with over 200,000 pages on it, Wikipedia, which you can go and read. There's a page about Cleveland in there, so you can go and read Wikipedia. By the way, very helpful in learning a language is to look up subjects in Wikipedia. So finally, the question is this just a dream? Is this possible that Esperanto will do anything like what its founder wanted to? Well, Esperantists like to point out that the metric system was first proposed in 1670. And even today, there are a few countries. What country could that be that doesn't use? Oh, yes. Even today, there are countries that have not adopted the very rational metric system. It's always a problem. someone from another country will ask, like that woman from France asked me, what was the temperature in Cleveland? I had to say, okay, I have to work this out because the way I know it's not the way it's going to make any sense to you. So 1670 metric system still not universally accepted. Well, Esperanto was only invented in 1878. We've still got. All right, that's the end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you.